have a quick rundown on doing the timing chain on this QR20 engine. This engine has variable valve timing on the intake side. So when you're looking at the timing cover, you can see this bulge here. There's a solenoid to control the oil flow to advance or retard the cam timing. On the intake only, a lot of more modern engines have it on the exhaust as well. But anyways, one of the first steps we want to do is verify that we're up at top dead center. So most engines on your harmonic balancer and on the timing cover will have a mark for you to when you're up at top dead center. So right now we know we're at top dead center. We just don't really know if we're actually on the at the end of the compression and the start of the power stroke, or are we at the end of the exhaust and the beginning of the intake. So the smartest thing to do would be pull your spark plugs, coils, spark plugs, take your cylinder head cover off here, and with the plugs out, we can drop them down, the steel rods that we use, put them down in your cylinders to verify you're up at top dead center. And also looking at your cams. Have a look in here on your cams and you'll see the lobes here on the exhaust and the intake aren't making contact with the valve lifters. So the valve lifters are free. So this tells me all 4 valves are closed right now. This piston's up as well, but the cam lobes are actually pushing down on the intake and the exhaust. So this cylinder is actually an overlap. So that makes sense. 1 and 4 travel together up and down, and you know, 1 is actually finishing the compression, starting the power, and number 4 is finishing exhaust, starting the intake. So we're in good position to start to open up the engine. Now this engine, as I mentioned, has variable valve timing. So what we want to do is pull, once you got the covers off and that, pull your variable valve timing solenoid out. There's a series of bolts up here. Then you'll be able to pull this cover back. Also take note, there's no gasket on these engines. So someone's been in here before and been using the orange RTV in here. And so you always kind of want to be careful when you're using that stuff. But this tells me someone's been in here before. So got the bolts off of that. You can actually see the variable valve timing phaser, they call this, for changing the position of the intake camshaft. This engine, what you'll see is that there's a chain, it's on a belt, has a colored link. So this engine hasn't been rotated since it was aligned, because the link is actually lining up with this marker here, which actually lines up with this bolt that holds the timing cover on, okay? This link here kind of is just a little bit above, you know, the horizon line, like up to here. And you'll see this link is, and this is the way it should be when we're all lined up. I'll show you on the other engine in just a second, okay? The thing is, if I start rotating this engine now, okay, and if I go around and do a 360 here, okay, 2 360s, okay, my marks are in the same spot, but the links are gone, okay? So it takes about, I think about 36 rotations before those links will actually be timed again. So you may open it up, and if the engine's been rotated, you're not going to see those colored links. They're just for later when we put the chain back on. Also take note, we have an auto tensioner on this engine here. Remember, it's turning clockwise, so your tensioner is always on the opposite side. You can see I can push it back with my finger, and I'll show you how to reset that in just a second. Cool thing is I could actually replace this auto tensioner right now without having to pull this whole timing cover off. So the next thing you want to do is we want to get the rest of the cover off. We need to get the harmonic balancer off. So 19 mil, you're gonna have to hold the crankshaft from the back and pull this bolt out. Now, the balancer on this engine doesn't slide off like it has on the Hondas. They're more of a press fit. And so Nissan has actually provided us with 2 bolt holes here so that we can install a puller, harmonic mounted puller. So we got this one off over here already. And so this tool, we call this a duck's foot because it looks like a duck, comes in the kit over there. And this piece threads in. And what we're going to do is mount this to your balancer, and then this piece, you want to make sure you put this tapered piece in here because it's going to be pushing on the end of the crankshaft. And if you just use this and push against the end of the crankshaft, you may damage the threads that hold the balancer on, and that's your crankshaft threads, so you don't want to do that. So they always come in a kit with different little adapters. So you're going to mount this piece. Remember, this would still be on the engine. So you're going to mount this. You need 2 6mm bolts, okay? Make sure they're the same length, okay? And that it's nice and straight. And then what's going to happen is, as I start threading this in, this is going to be pushing on the crankshaft, and it's going to lift the balancer right off of the crank. These aren't too tight. They should pop off pretty easily, but you get into some of the other engines, and without this tool, you don't have a hope in getting it off. Never pry a harmonic balancer though. If you can't get it off with your hands, use a puller. They're made out of 2 pieces, right? There's a center section, rubber, and then an outer ring. And if you start prying on that outer ring, you may damage the balancer. When you reinstall it, the crank's going to be out of balance. So work smart. Okay, so when you're taking the cover, there's going to be a whole series of bolts along here, all around. Also take note, swing over to the other engine again. There's actually 4 bolts inside here that hold this cover, and then you'll have a series of bolts holding this cover on. Now, just a little word of advice: when you got this cover off here, and what you'll see mounted inside the cover is actually the oil pump. Okay, if you worked on maybe the Nissan MR20 engine, the oil pump is actually down below inside the counterbalance assembly. But on these QR engines, it's a pain in the butt. The crankshaft has a pulley, an adapter in here that is going to be turning the oil pump off the crankshaft in here. Okay. And the other problem, because this is your oil pump, okay, the inlet to your oil pump requires your sump. So think about it for a second here. With this cover, the sump is down inside there. So to get this off, to get this whole assembly off, you would have to remove the oil pan and this lower half of the crankcase. Okay? So just think about that. If it was inside the car, what a pain in the butt. If you take a look back to this engine where we can see someone's been using silicone, someone's been in here before, and you can see the evidence where they've had silicone because they had to remove the oil pan, and they had to reseal the lower half of the crankcase so that they could access the pickup tube, and that would allow this to slide out more easily. Okay, so we've kind of taken the liberty on the engines that we're working on. We've taken the adapter and the oil pickup out because there just wouldn't be enough time in the lab class for us to take all that off. This would be, if this was a real flat rate job, this would be a 12-hour job. Okay. While we're in here now that we've opened it up, you're also going to see there's a second chain down here. The second chain actually has a tensioner as well, and that chain is turning a counterbalance shaft assembly below the engine. Okay, we're just going to do the timing chain for today, but normally if you bought a kit, you would get the chain, the guides, the sprockets, plus the chain for the counterbalance shaft, because that would be easy to do when everything is off. Okay. So now we can see our marks on this particular engine, again lined up with this bolt, just a slightly hair above you know, the horizon. Okay, just above that. But the other one that's real important is down below. There's an orange link and a dot on the crank sprocket. Above that, we see on this on the counterbalance shaft chain, there's a marker here and a dot on the engine block. The keyway too, we can see for the harmonic balancer is at 12 o'clock. Okay, and so that indicates, just like I was saying, number one is at top dead center now. So get the chain off. Okay, I'm just going to take this out. With the chain off, it's pretty easy. We can just push the chain tensioner back. These are actually hydraulically assisted. There's a spring in here, but when the engine is running, there's an oil gallery that pumps oil up here as well, and that helps assist to kind of cushion out the tensioner. But because there's no oil, the engine's not running right now, it's very easy to push this tensioner back. So now we've got this slack. I like to remove the tensioner from the engine right now. Okay. Again, this would be something you'd want to replace if you're doing this particular job. And like I said, you could take this off without removing the rear section of the timing cover. So that little window that we opened up here, you could actually swap this piece out pretty easily. So you see, guide's off. The guide just dropped down right now, and I'm going to actually remove that tensioner guide. And again, these are typically going to be worn out. This is plastic. Okay, so we have this one on the this particular side. Okay. Now the chain slack. Okay, and now you could actually pull the chain off. Now we have nothing to hold the cams in this position right now, so hopefully they don't move. If they do move, okay, if we look back up on top here on the cams, there's actually a hex, so you could put a wrench, or you could use, I hate to say it, but vice grips, okay, and you could roll the cams if they actually end up moving on us, which does happen. Okay, so nothing's moved. We'll see if we can get, so we got those two yellow links, okay? I should walk off the crank first. I want to make sure this orange one sits down in the center. It's real easy on this, okay? Come across on this side, across that one, there, okay? You want to make sure you get right in. That orange has to be in the center of that orange link. The orange on the center of that dot. Okay. So looks like nothing has moved. Okay. We gotta put our shoe back on there. So remember, this keeps the guiding. Yeah, let's have an extra hand here. Again, you can imagine doing this in a front-wheel drive car, all pinched in against the strut tower. A whole lot of fun. Guide our tensioner back in here. Notice how there's 2 bolts. I always start both by hand before I'm going to tighten anything. Okay. Now we're going to pull the pin and we're good. Okay. So like I said, the yellow link here, this link up here, and this is at 12 o'clock, and the orange dot in the center. So basically now, like I said, if you'd have to clean all the silicone up off of here, and you could put the cover back on, fresh silicone or TV. And you know, there's a seal here that you'd want to change on the bottom of the cover. Maybe a couple seals, and then you'd be basically good to go. But right now, if I do a 360 of the crankshaft, that's what happens. Okay. So there's 2 360s. So they're back at top dead center again. But look at the links don't line up anymore. Okay. But if I went around 36 times, then they would.